At UFC 291, will it be a turn back the clock moment, or are there going to be a lot of those Master Splinter pictures on Twitter and r/UFC? Because we have El Cucuy, Tony Ferguson, looking to do something to avoid a 6th straight loss when he takes on King Bobby Green, Mr. Shoulder Roll himself. When you look at it for Tony Ferguson, top level competition in all of these 5 fights. Now, he did get submitted his last time out against bare knuckle, or I guess boxing celebrity to be, Nate Diaz. He got submitted in that one at the very end of it. But if you look at it for Ferguson, I mean, we start off, he's taking on Justin Gaethje, UFC 249, interim lightweight strap on the line. He loses that one. He takes on Charles Oliveira, the champ to be. He takes on Beneil Dariush. He takes on Michael Chandler. And then, of course, the Diaz fight. And if you look at it for Bobby Green, scratching the top 15 in these fights. He lost a couple before he had the no contest against Jared Gordon. He was winning that fight until he wasn't. The clash of heads, it is what it is. But you saw Gordon get finished in that one. You saw Green get his hand raised. But when you do consider it overall, Bobby Green's a big, big favorite in this one. Ferguson, even back in June, he had that TMZ moment, and he was out there pleading not guilty to the alleged DUI. So for Ferguson, a big spot in this one because he's kind of on a BJ Penn roll right now.
I don't think he is, because BJ Penn didn't lose to guys that were still firmly entrenched in the top 15. I know the Nate Diaz fight's a little bit different, but we bring it up for Kevin Holland against Chimaev. That whole card was reshuffled the day before it happened, so I don't know how much stock I should put into that performance, because I brought up in the Derrick Lewis video, so I have to bring it up now. If Bobby Green fought everybody Tony Ferguson fought, he would get finished in the exact same way in all those fights, if not worse. And that's why I have such a hard time with where the odds are in this matchup, because, listen, you guys watch MMA like we do if you're watching this channel. You know what Bobby Green's really good at, and you know what Tony Ferguson's really good at. I don't know how Green is a justifiable 3-1 favorite, and this is why. Bobby Green is phenomenal boxing, right? We love the volume, we love the combinations, but he's not one of those one-hitter-quitter type of boxers who's really going to be able to sit down on the one shot and hurt you. And maybe Tony Ferguson's durability is so far gone to where, okay, Bobby Green can hurt him with some of those strikes, but Michael Chandler landed one of the hardest kicks we've ever seen to knock out Tony Ferguson. Ferguson was able to get out of some really difficult positions against Charles Oliveira. Like, he almost had his arm broke at the end of the first round. His arm was bent in ways that it's incomprehensible how he did not tap. I find this fight really difficult to break down because you're asking yourself, how much more does Tony Ferguson have left in the tank? And is he taking this fight thinking he's going to get back into the top 15? Or is this one of those matchups that kind of gets him put into a different rankings category? Into a, hey, you're just fighting other big names in the welterweight and lightweight division. Like, gangster weight was kind of Chael Sonnen's quote, right? Like, I'll fight you at middleweight or 205. I don't care. I'll fight you at either. For Tony Ferguson, I could see him doing kind of that 2 division thing. He's won the Ultimate Fighter at 170 way back when. I know that's a really hard thing to remember because it was so long ago. He was one of the better fighters at 155 pounds. I just don't know if that fight against Nate Diaz and the lack of fight out of that submission is telling or not. Because when he got put into that guillotine, the fight was kind of over immediately. And Tony Ferguson, who fought Kevin Lee, Tony Ferguson, who was making his way to the title, I think would have fought a lot more in some of those positions.
And Ferguson going into that 4th round, you had 2 judges, Sal D'Amato, Ron McCarthy, both had it 29-28 for Diaz. And then Junichiro Kamijo coming in like Evan Bourne. Matt, you like that reference?
I do. He was the recipient of one of the craziest RKOs of all time.
Yeah, Evan Bourne over the top rope. Yeah, Junichiro Kamijo, who had a 29-28 for Ferguson. He goes by Matt Seidel now. He wrestles with Ring of Honor, the stepchild of AEW.
Evan Bourne's in AEW right now.
Yeah, AEW, but Ring of Honor.
I just watched
It's
AEW.
the undercard of AEW. But if you do look at this, Matt, Tony Ferguson, I mean, the kicks, the spinning shots, the crazy fight that he had against Anthony Pettis that was Fight of the Year at UFC 229. You look at it, all the bonuses. He had the 12 wins in a row. He's 15-1 at one point in the UFC with the 1 loss to Michael Johnson, who also has a win over Dustin Poirier. But if you consider for Tony Ferguson, 5 losses in a row is pretty much a black mark on your record. And at UFC 216, that was the interim title win over Kevin Lee, where Lee was having success when he moved forward. And then Ferguson caught him with a check shot, and it started to go downhill from there. If you consider it for a guy like Ferguson, though, against a Bobby Green, you have to expect some of the wrestling, where Bobby Green has really good takedown defense. But that's the thing about
Tony Ferguson. Even with all of his submission wins, a lot of them don't come from him initiating the grappling sequences. He's having a lot of success on his feet. He's throwing those weird straight shots from odd angles, and then his opponents are the ones who's forced to take him down. Like, Kevin Lee is a way better wrestler than Tony Ferguson, right? I don't think a lot of people would argue that. But Tony Ferguson's cardio, mixed with his jiu-jitsu, mixed with his level of wrestling, it's a really difficult trio to try to overcome, but that's what I have a really hard time with. Can Tony Ferguson summon that version of himself? Can he still dig down that deep to get through those difficult positions? Because against Chandler, he was doing well in the first round. He dropped Chandler with a straight shot. I really thought we were going to see the El Cucuy of old, but unfortunately, seconds into that second round, it was one of the most disgusting knockouts of all time. But that's been the big problem with Tony Ferguson. Other than the Beneil-Dariush fight, and even then, he lands a really good up kick that Beneil openly admits, like, I was rocked, I was really hurt in that shot. Ferguson, even in these losses, is having a bit of success. He drops Justin Gaethje. He's having success against Oliveira. He's doing well against Beneil in some spots. But it always does come down to he just can't keep that success going for 5, 10, 15 minutes. And that's what I worry about with a guy like Bobby Green. But at least him fighting Green, you don't worry about him getting a crazy amount of damage. I know he's going to eat a lot of volume, but Green isn't that one-hitter quitter like a Poirier or like a Gaethje.
The significant strike per minute numbers for both these guys, for and then against, 5.07 to 3.95 for Ferguson, 5.97 to 3.67 for Bobby Green. And again, Green in the UFC, Strikeforce lineage, and then he comes in. He's been 10-9-1 with a no contest since his 2013 debut. And we touched on it with Ferguson, how good that lineage is. But the fight of the nights for Bobby Green, 2 of them against Lando Venado, 1 of them against Fiziev, where he came back in the 3rd round, and then against Drew Dober, success, but when he was getting backed up, it was that big looping shot for Dober.
Fight against Eric Koch, too, I remember.
Eric Koch, he was the promised guy. He was supposed to be that next.
That was his real nickname.
Love that shaved head with the man bun on the top. It was cool before it was cool with Eric Koch. But Matt, when you consider a fight like this, Green is favored. We have a look at the Topology vote. Surprised us there to you. Fans like Tony Ferguson, fans like Bobby Green as well. I'm going to say over, under, I think it's going to be closer than the odds, 65% Green.
I'll say it's over, but I agree with what you say. Both guys are fan favorites, and that's why I like this matchup. Like, Tony Ferguson at this stage of his career shouldn't be fighting Gaethje and Poirier, like the guys at the top of this card. But I think this fight against Bobby Green is one that fans are going to get excited for. Does the winner gain a lot? Probably not, but it's going to be a fun fight no matter what to put on the main card of a pay-per-view.
So over, under 65%?
I think it's going to be over for Green.
Green, and it is over. So 1,250 total votes, 76% Green, large majority, 54% by decision, 40% by knockout for the 24% that have Ferguson, 50% by decision, and then it's a mix between submission and knockout. Matt, who do you have in the matchup?
I think El Cucuy is one of the great nicknames in MMA, but I am going to pick Bobby Green, oddly enough. Again, I think if Tony Ferguson shows up the version of him that was on his way to the title, this fight isn't close. Like, that's how good Tony Ferguson was in his prime, but I just don't know if we have that same fighter in front of us anymore. It's been a lot of damage. Even when he was on his run, he would get hit by big shots. The difference was he could rebound from those big shots and have success. You bring up the Lando Venata fight for Bobby Green. The Lando Venata fight against Tony Ferguson is one of the craziest fights you'll ever see. Ferguson gets dropped on numerous occasions and ends up getting a Darrius choke at the end of the first round. It's one of the craziest short fights you will ever see in your life, but even then, he's fighting an unranked guy who had not fought in the UFC up until that point. Tony Ferguson was ranked, I think it was 4th or 5th in the division at that point, and he was still having fight of the nights against guys like Lando Venata.
Negative knockdown ratio for both these guys. It's 3-4 to 5 against for Ferguson. It's 3-4 to 4 against for Bobby Green. The durability's question mark no matter.
Bobby Green got dropped 3 times by Poirier, though.
Where you go, but when you do look at a fight like this, I do like Tony Ferguson in the fight. I think his last time out, he was due Li Jingliang at 170 pounds, and on a day's notice, he ends up with Nate Diaz. I was surprised that he got submitted. I was surprised that he was down 2-1 going into the 4th. I had it 2-1 for Diaz. But for me, I do like Ferguson in the matchup. Again, volume out of both these guys, a big key. And if you look at it for Bobby Green, shoulder rolling out of the way, if he's able to figure out the distance early and figure out Tony Ferguson, he has a big time method for him. So Matt, split on the pick in this one. I'm going El Cucuy. You're going with King Bobby Green. Let us know what you have down below in the comment section on this one. The main card has Thompson versus Pereira. The main card also has Blachowicz versus Pereira. So you're not going to want to miss any of this action. Keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks. We always say, let's get into it.